Tell your children. Tell your children of it, and let your children tell their children and their children another generation. Thus begins the brief but powerful prophetic word of Joel. The story Joel refers to is so important that it is worthy of being told and retold. This morning, our own Joel has helped us understand his story. A small rural community recently devastated by a plague of locusts. The vineyards, the orchards, the pasture lands, all ruined as if by a fire. Suffering animals, empty granaries, no harvest, economic devastation. Unprecedented devastation on every farm, in every home, in every life. Theirs is a national crisis. The people are perplexed and they're afraid. Joel's message is clear. When you do not know which way to turn, when you do not know where to go, Joel tells the people as a community to return to God. Implicit in his command to the people is that God has not abandoned them. God is close. What shall we tell the children? Following the events of September 11th, 2001, our nation returned to God in a remarkable way. Weekday prayer services were packed. Sunday worship attendance increased in all houses of worship and remained higher than average for a number of months. People gathered out of a common need, seeking to make sense of what had happened and drawing comfort from each other and comfort from the presence of God. The community came together and recognized its center in the God of Israel. And so it seems that Americans, just like the people of Judah, understood that a national crisis could bring them together as nothing else would do. What shall we tell the children? In the second chapter of Joel's prophecy, we encounter the words often read and most often heard on Ash Wednesday. Yet even now, return to the Lord. That is, despite all the things that you have done wrong, all the ways that you have separated from yourself from God, the prophet says, yet even now, return to God. Return to the Lord with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful. Your God is slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love. The Hebrew word for return suggests turning around, that is, going back to the place where you first started. That is, returning to the time, to the place when you first recognized the power of God, the love of God, the mercy of God, the goodness of God. Immerse yourself once more in the God of creation, the God of redemption. Remember what you have been told. Remember what you have experienced. Remember the grace of God raining down, even as the locust devoured the crops. What shall we tell the children? Joel's prophecy calls the people of God to model a faithful response to uncertainty, to fear, to chaos. That is, Joel calls for the community, not individuals, but for the community, to come together, to gather as community to worship God, to worship the God whom they know as gracious and merciful. Joel calls them to return to the God they know and to hand over their unfaithfulness, their fear, their failings, and to rest securely in the God who loves them, always loves them. Telling the children has a long tradition in the Old Testament. In Psalm 78, the worshiping congregation is invited to hear the things they have heard and known and which have been told to them, and then to tell the next generation and the next. At Pentecost, Jews from all over the world heard the disciples of Jesus telling in their own tongues about the mighty works of God. We are a blessed people. While so many congregations lament the lack of children in their midst, we are blessed with their presence. And you take seriously the vows you made in baptism as you teach our children and pray for them and paint with them and cook with them and love them. Last week, this building was filled with holy chaos. The voices of 100 children swelled in our space. They sang of the power of God and of God's forgiveness. They laughed and danced and painted and crafted and ran and jumped and prayed. Their joy was palpable. And there were nearly as many youth and adults here as there were children. The adults were telling. The adults were telling the good news, and so were the children. In his commentary on Joel, James Limburg tells the story of a Sunday school teacher he once had. He said the teacher borrowed a bank sign which said simply, "Teller." He greeted his class one Sunday morning with that sign hung around his neck. And he used it to remind them that such was the calling of each of God's people. That is, we are to be tellers of the story of faith. After a plague of locusts passed through their community, God's people had a dramatic story to tell. A story of uncertainty and loss, a story of fear, and ultimately a story of God's abiding presence. Theirs was a story of losing their way and then returning to God and knowing all the benefits of that relationship with God because God had never turned away from them. Sometimes we are too preoccupied to examine our lives. Sometimes we are looking backward or forward and fail to look at this, at what is right in front of us. In this season of travel and return, I urge you to look for the places where God is present in your life. Look for the dramatic moments of life, for surely there will be some of those. But also, look for the quiet aha moments when that which you know of God takes on new and fresh meaning. For we have much to tell each other. We have much to tell the children about who God is and what God is doing in our lives and in our world. Like Joel's people, may we respond faithfully to the uncertainty and to the fear and to the chaos around us by telling a different story, a story as old as it is new. Ours is the story of a powerful God at work in every place, and time. And that, my friends, is what we will tell the children. God is gracious. God is merciful. God is slow to anger. God abounds in steadfast love. Amen.